Jest jakiś gameplay. No dobra, ale wróćmy na Coliseum.
Hello, I'm back again. That wasn't too long.
I co ciekawe, zaczynamy od trailera. Właśnie tego The Dark... coś tam? Nie pamiętam tu? The Dark Pictures, o właśnie. Ej, bo to ciekawe i to nie wiem, czy to jest na Oculusa, na VR, bo tak to wyglądało na IGN-ie, ale nie wiem.
Tom, Sean, welcome to E3.
Thank you.
So, Sean, I was saying backstage, I feel like it's every year we get a new.
Not
new
every
game.
year, but every couple of years.
Every couple
Yeah,
years.
I feel like I feel lucky to have been a part of some pretty incredible games with fantastic storytellers. I mean, Supermassive, who did this, was I was tracking Until Dawn when I was making Quantum Break because it was sort of like the motion capture, the performance. That was something that was a huge interest to me as an actor. That our performances can be translated, from mocap to players' hands, and so it's very exciting.
Yeah, no, Tom, as Sean said, I mean, Until Dawn. Such an amazing game. I think it's aged very well too. I think I talked to a lot of people that go back and still play it because it's such an incredible experience. Tell us, kind of, moving on to this project. Horror genre, deep narrative. As I said, Until Dawn. Is this kind of a spiritual successor to that, or I mean, how do you treat it? Because it's certainly a genre that I think you guys are uniquely.
Kind of. Well, I mean, we learn a massive amount from Until Dawn.
Yeah.
It was a big learning. Whole process for our studio. I mean, in all areas.
Okej, czyli to jest gra od twórców. No, tego Dawn, Boże. Czemu mi tak słowa uciekają z głowy? Until Dawn, o właśnie.
It's where our heart is as a studio, and we sat down and kind of riffed through all the various ideas. Horror has a lot of subgenres. And Until Dawn was one of those subgenres. So we kind of made this list. We got to about 39 subgenres of horror, and one idea that came about was, well, why can't we do all of these? So that was the idea of the anthology, that we would make a series of games exploring these different subgenres, using what we'd learned from Until Dawn.
Ja generalnie horrorów nie lubię. Nie grałem w Until Dawn, nie oglądałem Until Dawn, chociaż wydaje się być spoko gierą, ale po prostu nie lubię horrorów.
Really surprised us when we released the game was the people streaming it and people watching it over streaming services and engaging with the game in that way. That we didn't really anticipate that. It was a long development. We were kind of deep in it. We missed that whole development. So, but it was cool. I mean, I literally came home on the day it was released and turned on my PS4, and just hundreds of people streaming the game, and that was an incredible experience. So that was one thing, was the way that the way that the audience engaged with the game, not just the game, but with the stuff outside the game, and they engaged with the way the characters related to each other. They kind of worked out not just the relationships that we planned, but other relationships between the characters. So those were things that surprised us. And then we tried to work out, okay, well, they were cool things. How can we develop those? How can we deepen those systems? We were pretty happy with the branching in our game and the way that the narrative kind of twists and turns around. And one of our key plans going into Medan and the rest of the Dark Pictures series was to really expand that branching and really deepen it. So it's an extremely branching narrative, much more so than Until Dawn. And there's a skill to producing that, so it was, kind of happy.
No, ja bardzo lubię branching narrative, także mówię, dlatego mi się to podoba. Tylko najgorsze to horror.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the first script that I got was 1,000 pages. I mean, it was this massive, and I was like, how are we going to get through all this? I mean, that's one of the major differences, too, between film and television and video games is the length of script, and because of the branching narratives. But what is, from a performance perspective, what's interesting is, as opposed to a film and television script where here's the arc, here's the story. You start here, the journey is this, the story is this. So you prepare your character based on that sort of one storyline. With a video game with all this branching story, you actually, in a way, get to spend more time exploring this character because you're looking at all the different paths. Like, well, what if he goes this way? What if he makes a choice that makes him more of a villain in the story? Well, then you start to explore the darker side of this character. Well, what if the player chooses a more heroic aspect of this guy? So you really get to see all the varieties of who these characters could be, the possibilities of that, which is kind of interesting. And the other thing too that I had fun with this game in particular is that Supermassive, this is a bold story. So to come into a horror story and play a character who is kind of, I play this character named Conrad, who's this American tourist who's kind of brash. He's not the nicest guy in the world. But in a survival type scenario and almost in a detective type scenario where you're exploring this world, it's kind of nice to have a character that has no filter, that's just going to jump in and start, stirring things up. So it was fun.
Going through this and building this world, tell us a bit about kind of the setting of it, Tom, and kind of, Conrad obviously is a character, but how does Sean's character fit into this?
Okay, so the setting is there's 4 American guys who are on a diving holiday in the South Pacific. They kind of know each other. Conrad is there with his sister and who's Julia, and she's there with her boyfriend, and then Alex, and then he's there with his brother. So some of them know each other. Some of them have never met, but they're there on this holiday. They've got the skipper of the boat, who's called Fliss, joins them, and they go out diving. That's what they do. And they find this World War II plane wreck at the bottom of the ocean. It's kind of what they were looking for. They're very excited about it. They go on a dive down there, and they find something and bring it back up to the surface. And that is a mistake. That's something they shouldn't have done.
Okej, czyli mamy zaraz historii, nawet całkiem ciekawy.
And because it's a horror game, things kind of go bad quite quickly after that. And they end up on this huge freighter, this World War II freighter, which is anchored in the middle of the Pacific. It's rusting, it's abandoned, and they're stuck there. Their engine's out, they haven't got any radio contact. They don't know what to do. And as they explore inside this kind of massive space, they find there's something there, and that there's a backstory, and there's something there, and they're going to have to fight to get out alive. And then you, as the player, you have to get them out alive. That's your job.
Good luck.
Yeah.
And so when you're recording,
Czyli założenie bardzo podobne jak w Until Dawn.
you didn't know how you were going to get through it. You got through it somehow. So
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
Again, daunting. I mean, you look at that much dialogue and the branching content. I think what these guys did really well for the actors was create sort of like a lookbook of reference photos for what the environment's going to be like. Because when you're doing a motion capture performance, you're basically just in a warehouse with actors and some technicians. So there's nothing to refer to. Whereas if you're on a movie set, you've got the lighting, you've got the props, you've got all these things. So first and foremost, the research they did and the sort of lookbooks that they created for us were fantastic. The other thing that's challenging in one way, but also very freeing, is that there are no other distractions. Just the actors, the director, the technicians in a room. And so, as opposed to having to be like rooted on spot on a mark where the cameras need to be, you can move around a lot. You know, and so I think specifically in horror performances, it's all about this fear, but that usually comes from a physicality. Your heart's up, you're sweating, and we were allowed to move around a lot. So that was cool. And
really,
it's
physicality. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, and I've done quite a few sort of horror things in the past, and it's such a difficult emotion to replicate because it really does come from a physical response. All your neurons are firing. And again, when I sit in a horror film and there's a big jump scare or whatever, I sweat. Or my heart's racing, and I think to try to replicate that. There's a physicality. You can sort of cheat, by getting your blood up and sort of doing that. So that was kind of a really unique thing while doing a motion capture performance, is that we were allowed to move around a little bit, and we have this space that you could just interact. But also, there's no other distractions. The script, the director, the actors, you're all there. And again, it's not about like, okay, we're running a take, and if you mess it up, then we have to start all over again. Yeah. You can just sort of run it. And there's a lot of freedom to that I think allowed us to get through a lot of material and efficiently and effectively. Like feel like, oh, we really did that. You can wing it a little bit. Just if you want to jump back in a scene and start over, or you've gotten ramped up to emotional state. The first take, well, we're not quite there. You build up, you build up, you build up. Okay, take 6, we're on it, and we can just roll right through it. And you're like, oh, that's the one that works, because we've built up this performance.
It's so important for us.
Teraz Bartko jest o The Dark Pictures, Man of the Medan, czy jakoś tak. Bardzo ciekawa gra od twórców Until Dawn, horror. A wcześniej w sumie nic bardzo ciekawego nie było. Była rozmowa z reżyserem Johnego Wicka i gościem, który jest dyrektorem kreatywnym Fortnite'a na temat jakiejś tam storytelling across screens, tak to się nazywało. Coś jeszcze oglądaliśmy? Chyba nie. Na Dying Light chyba byłeś. Także...
It's easily the most branching game we've done.
Wow. How many endings?
It's difficult to quantify the number of endings because there's a lot of permutations, and it's not. There's several completely different endings, but within each of those, there are different ways that those endings can play out. So there's differences even within the individual endings. Right. And then there might be, we have this rule: everyone can live and everyone can die. So we kind of, as developers, we don't know who's there. Absolutely. So everyone can live, everyone can die. We don't know who's going to be there at that ending, and we have to kind of make that work.
Tak, będziemy jeszcze oglądać coś, tylko to mnie zainteresowało i dlatego zostaliśmy na Coliseum, ale będziemy jeszcze na pewno Cyberpunka oglądać dzisiaj, bo jest na IGN-ie.
Well, it's, you look at like obviously Bandersnatch and what they were doing was sort of branching interactive narrative, and I think you're in a space where I remember the old FMV video games, but it's like what I love is that you guys are doing it with incredible graphics. It's still fully interactive, right? And everyone's like, Bandersnatch, you're like, oh, we've never seen this before. And it's like, actually, like, you guys have been, doing this much better for a while. And something like Until Dawn, there's just so much more possibility when things are digital versus having to have so many fixed sort of endings. So the appeal of doing more branches, is that to make the player have more agency, feel the story is more their own?
Well, yeah, absolutely. If a player's chosen to play our game and we ask them to make a choice or do something, then we have to pay attention to what they're doing. If we don't branch there, then that means it didn't really matter. So every time we give you some interaction, we're kind of creating a branch at that point. It might be quite a small branch. It might just be how a different player, a different character thinks about you or something like that, but it might be massive. It might be life or death, or the story might veer off into another direction entirely.
How do you go about writing that? Like keeping it straight in your head, right?
Well, we don't try and keep it straight in our head. That's the first thing. That was our first attempt.
A lot of flowcharts at the office. Yeah.
we wrote documents in Word and stuff, and that didn't really work. I mean, the first thing we do is we try and get to a really good story with really strong characters, and we don't worry too much about the branching. We just say, what's our story? What story are we trying to tell? Why are we trying to tell it? And who's going to be in it? And how will they develop? What are their arcs and things like this? Very conventional narrative stuff. Once we're really happy with that, we think that's going to be really cool. Then we start to think about the branching, and it's really just looking at every element of of that story and saying, well, what if the player decides to do this instead? And then we have to think that through and make sure that what happens sometimes is we'll get some really cool event on one branch, and that kind of becomes a favorite branch. Well, I hope everyone does that. And then we have to say, no, we need something that's just as cool over here, and that can be difficult to do sometimes. So there's a kind of big thought process about how to make kind of break this into a series of really interesting stories. And then we've got a tool we developed in-house, kind of a big flow tool, very, very complicated. And we can just write out the story in this flow tool and put some storyboards or whatever in there, and we can play the game. We can play the whole game in this very kind of basic way, like a kind of text adventure.
Right, yeah.
And we play it, and we play it, and we play it. I think you saw this, didn't we?
Yeah,
showed it.
it's cool. It really feels like the most distilled, basic version of...
Czy ja dobrze słyszałem, że tam coś było, że taka gra bardzo uproszczona i przechodzą to ciągle?
Then you can extrapolate and be like, wow, when the graphics are here, when the full performances are here, imagine what it's going to be like. And we were sort of shown that So when I'm following the story and being like, oh, I want to make this choice, and it's exciting in that state, for me as an actor that is just sort of there to add my performance, I'm like, wow, when this thing all comes together, it's going to be fantastic. And I wanted to add one thing that you're mentioning about the branching content. There's things that I found the most exciting were not necessarily giant story, like story points where a story or the narrative goes in one direction or another, but it can be just as simple as a decision that two characters make between a relationship, and then that relationship changes. The story may continue, but the way that these characters interact, their attitude towards each other, for the rest of the story has changed. And so, again, from a performance perspective, very interesting and very difficult to track, because you're like, wait, is this the track where we're not getting along? Is this the track that we are?
It was pretty crazy on set, wasn't it? Sometimes
No, to jest właśnie najlepsze. To samo mówił Brian Deckard, kiedy grał Connora.
I think from a player's perspective, to go back and be like, well, if I made that tiny decision...
Nie, Bartko, CD Projekt nie robi niczego, co nie jest quality. Także ja się o to nie martwię, że kolekcjonerka może być jakaś mniejszej, gorszej jakości.
But the way that the characters interact is different. Like, that was cool to me. Like, super complex.
I think the branching stuff that games can do is so incredible, and even like when you play a David Cage game, you see like what percentage people pick this or that. Have you thought about sort of how you're gonna? Are you going to reveal to people sort of like what the popular branches are, the choices, and obviously it's it's a little bit more branching versus like moral. But there are moral choices in some.
Ja bym bardzo chciał, żeby w takich grach właśnie było to, co zrobił David Cage w Detroit Become Human, czyli drzewko wyborów. To było świetne.
We do surface that, but we do it in our own way. So we wanted to move away from percentages and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We wanted to kind of give players a map of the path they played, and explain the kind of cause and effect. Because you did this, then this happened, and then this happened. And we get these kind of chains of stuff.
So I mean, Cage has done that a little bit too, where you can sort of like see the grid, right? So similar to that.
Yeah, it's kind of similar. It's a similar thing to what we did in Until Dawn.
Yeah.
It's a bit more developed, and it's about when we know that these sort of games, narrative games, people love to replay them. They go back, they try and save the people that got killed, or find different endings, or whatever.
Someone on Reddit's going to create the flowchart anyway.
Some of that stuff is amazing.
Someone's going to work for you eventually.
We look at those flowcharts and wow, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, that's why, because people, like you said, want to understand. They want to play every option,
Absolutely,
right? It's like, can I really do that? And you always wonder when you play a game. It's like, if I pick that other option, is it really going to change, or is it going to sort of just be like, a dialogue option changes, or is this character really going to die or not? And when they do, you're like, oh wow, I wonder what the other path is.
I think they're going to find it difficult with Man of Medan to build up, because some of it is branching that's reasonably easy to track, but some of it does come through relationships. It comes through the character traits that you have. But yeah, we have a guide that tells you the key cards of cause and effect. It doesn't tell you what you haven't encountered yet, but it kind of explains your story. And if you replay, you can head back in, and that'll kind of tell you maybe different decisions to make.
Yeah. Coming out in August, so it's nearly done. I'm curious, Sean, like the process for you of doing this. Do you go back and do shoots over time, or is it kind of one block?
Kurde, to jak to The Dark Pictures, tak? Muszę sobie to zapisać.
Well, in Man of Medan, we did two
shoots,
big sessions, essentially.
Wow.
They were week-long sessions, and again, it's a ton of material to fit in. But again, you're doing nothing but the work. There's no setup, there's no lighting, there's no hair and makeup. It's just you just jump in and act. So for this, it was actually, you know, it felt like the story was put together, the script was done and completed, so we just went in and told the story. Yeah, it was actually, again, very efficient, very easy process.
But I'm sure it must be hard because you're jumping around all these branches and like keeping it straight about like where you're at in the game, where your character's
Yes,
at.
but again, these guys had like flowcharts and details, and believe me, we had many questions where we're about to jump into a scene, and I'm like, wait, we have to track 10 choices back. Yeah. Because they all branch out.
Well, as an actor, you kind of want to know, you know, the grounding of your character.
Always, especially in heightened emotion, especially in life and death situations. Like, it seems kind of ridiculous. Like, well, you're scared. It's like, yes, but am I scared because of this? And again, maybe those are details that don't necessarily are not as important to people when they're playing because they're just experiencing it. But I do think that you will feel those minute changes.
I think it is important because you know, facial mocap now is so accurate. It can pick up tiny emotions.
Yeah.
So you have to have the right emotion in your head when you deliver the line. And, you know, we really see that.
Yeah, well, it's amazing what you guys have done of really crafting this new genre. And yeah, I mean, we loved you in Quantum Break, Sean, but this is you know, something that I think is again something that people are going to keep playing again and again. And I think, as you said, the streaming culture.
No, ja uwielbiam branching narrative, uwielbiam gry Cage'a i to też bym uwielbiał, gdyby to nie były horrory, bo przez to trochę mi będę bał się grać po prostu.
End of August, right?
End of August, yeah.
End of August. All right. Well, thanks so much, guys.
Thanks,
Enjoy
man.
the rest of
Cheers.
E3.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, guys.
No cóż, bardzo fajny panel, podobał mi się. Dalej mamy chyba chyba Call of Duty. Tak jest, czyli to nas mało obchodzi.